Welcome to Freedom Fighters Code Grey. This is a show where we discuss human trafficking, an issue that's happening in our backyard. The main form of trafficking here in Canada is sex trafficking and sexual exploitation. So you might be wondering, what drives the demand for sex trafficking in Canada? Who are the purchasers of sex? Well, today I have with me a special guest, Hennes Doltze, and he's here to share his expertise on this topic. Welcome, Hennes.
Thank you, Michaela. It's nice to be here, and thank you for having me on your show.
How did you hear about human trafficking, Hennes? What was the first time that you heard about it, and how did you come to be involved in this work?
So the first time I heard about it was actually in 2004 when I was a student doing my field placement for a social work degree. And I was here in Winnipeg working with the Salvation Army and really being exposed to the issue of prostitution, of the demand side, the reasons why women get engaged and then how they're forced into it sometimes. But it wasn't until 2012 that I actually became the program manager and ran the Prostitution Offender Program here in Winnipeg for the last 7 years.
So what is the Prostitution Offender Program?
So at the core, the program is to engage with men in the issue of prostitution and buying sex. So we work together with a number of government partners, mainly the Crown attorneys and the police, also a number of community agencies to address sex trafficking and prostitution from the demand side. So after somebody's been arrested by the police, they would be referred to our program. I would meet with them, and then we enter into this work with them to address issues of why men buy sex, educating them on the impact that prostitution has on the community, on the women that are involved, but also on themselves. So it's a mix between education, accountability, busting some myths around, why men buy sex and that it's, something that doesn't harm anybody, and really trying to bring about a change of heart amongst the men and teach them and help them to recognize that what they're engaging in is actually harming a lot of other people.
One of the things that you mentioned as part of the program is to educate people about the myths of purchasing sex. So when we look at our society, what do you think some of the misconceptions are that people have about the purchase of sex?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think first of all, it's in some ways our culture is very much sort of accustomed to having prostitution in a lot of ways, and it's become normalized. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about why women are engaged, and it's primarily women who are on the selling side. That they want to be there, that it's their choice, that they like doing this kinds of things. So a lot of things that are simply not true when you look at the bulk of the women. And then on the other side, for men, to understand, that this is not some victimless crime, that nobody's getting hurt or that doesn't have any impact on it. So I think a lot of people think that the main reason that men buy sex is because, they're lonely, they can't, establish a relationship with somebody like most of us people do. And so they choose to purchase sex, right? But in reality, in our program, about half of the men that are in the program are actually in a relationship. So whether they're married or in a common law relationship. So that argument that, these guys can't get a partner is simply not true. And also, I think some of the myths are around that, that nobody's impacted. And this is really what we're trying to highlight in the program, is to say, well, this isn't just between two adults, but there's many more levels of impact on a community. It's almost like you have a little pebble and you throw it on a lake that is crystal clear, and still it has these ripple effects, right? And that's what we're really trying to engage with the guys and peel away the layers of demand of prostitution and eventually what fuels sex trafficking and human trafficking, because there's a market for it, and the market is made up of the demand of men who choose and who are willing to buy sex.
Can you speak to that a little bit more, in the sense of, I feel like talking about the demand for the purchase of sex is sometimes removed from conversations regarding human trafficking. And so Why do you think that we need to address demand? Why do we need to talk about demand as it relates to specifically fighting sex trafficking?
Mm-hmm. Well, when you break it down really to the bare bones, it's an industry that preys on vulnerable people, which is one side, people that are being trafficked. You have the sex traffickers or people that commit human trafficking, but then you have the third element, and that is really the demand, right? So if there wasn't the demand, if there wasn't a market where a man would be willing to pay for sex, to go online, to choose the woman that they want to buy sex from, if that wasn't happening, this business would be maybe not existent, but it would be much reduced, right? And so, but because there is a market that encourages the traffickers to lure in women and girls and to exploit them, because they know that they can make money off of them. And unless we start taking that side into consideration and focus on the men as well, I think all of our efforts will fall short, because if we only focus on victims, which is absolutely necessary and important, but we're just recreating a cycle, and more younger and younger women and girls are being exploited, and unless we start looking and focusing on, well, who are the men that buy them, and why do they buy them, and how many are there, I think we're missing a major important part of this industry, right? And so in economic terms, although I hate to use those terms, but it's like if you eliminate the demand, you create a much different environment that is less likely to produce a lot of victims.
While you're just sharing so much information that I'm still even processing, one of the things that you said that really stuck out to me is breaking the cycle of violence, breaking the cycle of abuse and of trafficking. And so I'm curious to know, from your experience running and leading the Prostitution Offender Program, from your perspective, how do you think that program does that? Why does this program exist? And also, I would ask, in regards to some of the questions you were just asking there, who does the program help typically?
Mm-hmm. So I'll start maybe with your second part of your question. So who does the program help? So we have about 100 people in the program every year. It fluctuates. It has gone down since COVID started, just because it makes it harder for police to enforce the laws. But prior to COVID, we would have about 100 people in the program, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes less. Quite frankly, they were men from all walks of life, from all backgrounds. We had people that were barely 18. We had people that were in their 70s or even older, and from all ethnic backgrounds, from people that are professionally well established, all income levels. In fact, it was actually people with more disposable income that were in the program rather than people who live in poverty. And so, the common denominator, and I get this asked often, what does this specifically look like a man that purchased sex? And the common denominator is basically that they're a man, whether they're from and recently arrived immigrant, or somebody who's lived in Canada all of their life. It really seems to be the gender aspect, and there are certainly women who have been arrested, but the overwhelming majority is really men, and you see this also in other areas where men are primarily the users of, whether it's pornography or other things. So that is I think there's such a wide field of people that fall into the program. And what we are really trying to do is to find a balance between education and accountability. So accountability on one hand, to say, okay, with your behavior of purchasing sex, you're contributing to the cycle of prostitution, of exploitation, of trafficking, but also education to say, okay, what is even the legal situation in Canada? A lot of people are confused. They don't know the law. They don't know that it is illegal to purchase sex, but not illegal to sell it. And so we want to highlight, what is the legal framework in Canada? What are potential consequences if somebody has to go to court and is convicted on a charge? But also, spreading sort of a wider focus to say what other things are important here as well. So we bring in people from the police, we bring people in from child protection, and even though nobody in the program has been arrested for trying to purchase from somebody under the age of 18, we know that a lot of women who are adults started when they were under 18, and then we focus on personal testimonies from women that were involved in the industry prior, and that is always such a powerful and impactful story for the men to hear, because it is for once bringing a story, bringing a personal testimony to them that they didn't see or that they chose not to see prior, right? They always saw her as the sort of the object, of sexual gratification. And here they have to listen to her when she shares, how she ended up. And it's usually, experiences of trauma, abuse, poverty, all of those reasons that are making somebody vulnerable. And so we try to really take an approach that isn't confrontational and putting somebody in the hot seat, but we want somebody to open their minds and hearts. And we have found this much more helpful to engage with them in a respectful conversation to say, okay, these are the realities, and really trying to appeal to their humanity, to make a change and to recognize, hey, this could be my sister, this could be my mom, this could be my daughter who's being exploited, right? And here I am taking an active part in that. So, and it resonates with a lot of guys, not with everybody, of course, but it's generally something where we have felt more deeper change is possible when we take this approach rather than sort of the heavy-handed approach and just saying this is illegal, etc. We haven't found that very helpful, and that's why we really want to engage in that conversation. We also bring somebody in who is a counselor who then focuses on, okay, what are your, meaning the man's specific reason of why he buys sex, right? And that's also something I think that we want to highlight is because, okay, as much as we want to focus on accountability, well, we also want men to help succeed if they choose not to be engaged in prostitution and sex buying anymore.
I really appreciate how you're sharing and even articulating the way the program comes alongside and supports folks, and really emphasizing that each individual's humanity and engaging them in a conversation in a respectful way, but in an effort to help shift mindsets and perspectives, and also to facilitate healing, and in your words, as you just shared, promote success. So Hennes, this has been an enlightening conversation so far, and I really appreciate you sharing your expertise with me and our viewers, and thanks so much to the viewers for tuning in. We're going to take a short break and then we'll be right back.
We are a wave of change, and together we are unstoppable.
We're really looking for a system overthrow.
We are unstoppable. Another world is possible. We had 150,000 people in the street. That's crazy.
Demand action because it's your entire future.
Ready to move forward financially? Then you won't want to miss Money Matters with Doug Jones here on Rogers TV. It's a personal finance show focused on getting you expert advice in all matters related to
welcome back to Freedom Fighters Code Gray. This is a show where we discuss human trafficking, and today we're tackling the demand side. Who are the purchasers of sex, and why do we need to talk about demand when we are discussing the fight against human trafficking? And today with me, we have Hennes Doltze, and we're going to continue our conversation on this front. So Hennes, I was wondering if you could just break it down for our viewers or our listeners today. What are the laws regarding the purchase and sale of sex here in Canada right now?
Mm-hmm. So I want to go back maybe a step. Like the laws were changed in 2000 and I think it was 14. And prior to that, prostitution was seen sort of as a nuisance. So as long as it didn't happen in the public eye, it was legal. Now that changed when the law was changed, and now any attempt to purchase sex anywhere, so this could be on the internet, on a website, in an email exchange, a chat, or in person in a hotel, on the street, any attempt to purchase sex is criminalized already. So that means that the conversation to engage somebody and say, okay, I'll give you $20 for a blowjob, that's already a criminal offense for the person who's attempting to purchase. And that is also important to know, because it doesn't actually have to come sort of to the actual act of purchasing sex, but already the conversation is illegal. On the other side, it is not illegal to sell sex. And so that's why women, primarily women who are or the sellers of sex, were decriminalized, because the government recognized that most of them, maybe not all, but most of them do not do this because it's their choice or because they enjoy it so much, but because there's some sort of level of force or desperation or trafficking happening. And so this is what we call an asymmetrical law. So one side is criminalized, which is the purchase, and the other side is not criminalized, which is the selling of sex. Some people also call it the Nordic model, because it was developed in Sweden, and then a number of Nordic countries adopted it. Recently, people started to call it the equality model, because what it really aims to do is to make people equal in a sense of addressing prostitution on the demand side, and raising the bar on the equality level amongst women. So rather than criminalizing them, states have adopted a method to help them and not criminalize them. And this is what's the situation here in Canada.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that the laws that we have in place, PSEPA, or otherwise known as the Nordic model, or also the equality model, is really interesting, because reflecting back on our earlier parts of the discussion and how you were highlighting how most purchasers are men, most individuals who are impacted by the sex industry or sex trafficking are women and girls. And then if we add in the traffickers and who the traffickers are, we know the majority are men as well. So there is a gender inequality piece that needs to be addressed as we discuss this issue. So I think it's really interesting as well that our law is called the equality model to some folks. So Hennes, with this law and how it's in place, how does that impact people on the demand side? So say someone is having that conversation to purchase a sexual service and law enforcement overhears, so what does that process look like? And then how does someone end up being charged and then potentially in your program?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, first of all, in order to put some teeth to the law, local law enforcement will have to make the decision to enforce the laws. And that is a very interesting situation, because it's very different across Canada. Like you have cities like Winnipeg and Edmonton, where the police services have decided to enforce it. And you have other cities where this is not the case for a number of different reasons. So for us in Winnipeg here, because we have a history of a very strong community focus and a lot of indigenous agencies really advocating, not exclusively, but also advocating to say, okay, we need to address prostitution in its entirety. And so I think there's a much greater appetite for, the Winnipeg police to do that, because it is something that the community is really interested in and keen in to address, because a lot of the women in prostitution here are actually Indigenous background. So most of the time we get a referral from the police when they arrest somebody. So they would enforce on the street or in a hotel. And then if they come across somebody who's communicated and they would qualify, then they would be able to send them to us. So sometimes they call this stings or sting operations. And if somebody is eligible, we would work with them and then really engage in that discussion around that, right? There's also a fee, which is $800. So there's a financial aspect to it where people have to be paying into the program in order to participate as well.
And so in that regard, is the program voluntary or is the program mandatory for those who are arrested for purchasing sex?
It is given as an option. So at the time of the arrest, the police will give the information for our program to the person that was arrested, and they can choose to participate, or they can choose to take the matter to trial or to court. So it isn't fully mandatory, but it isn't voluntarily either. So it's somewhere in between. But people have a choice to participate. If they do not, then they can take it to trial. And then, depending on the outcome, either face a conviction or be acquitted. But most likely, because it is a police operation, it'll lead to a conviction. So most people are signing up, because they're asked by the police to do that. But they're given the choice in some ways.
And so what would be the benefits on a legal front for someone to decide to join the program instead of going the other alternative route?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a good question. So we operate under what we call a restorative justice model. So if people participate in the program and they complete all of the program requirements, their charges would actually be stayed. So meaning they would not face a conviction and they would not face a criminal record in the end. And we believe that, it is a meaningful way of engaging with men, and again, striking that balance between accountability, but also, applying restorative justice principles to say, okay, we don't necessarily need to fill up courts and prison systems with people that commit these offenses. I think the courts are overloaded with a lot of other things as well. And so at the end, they would have their charges stayed. And if they never get involved again, that charge would not come up again in court for them.
And if someone is struggling with pornography or sex addiction and they haven't been arrested and they haven't actually maybe even engaged in a conversation yet, so they haven't faced any charges, could they still reach out and join the program?
Yeah, they could. And often it is, sex addiction and pornography that is sort of a driving force. It's not the only. Sometimes it's a number of host problems, loneliness, or sometimes it is a level of control that people want to have over somebody else. But if somebody's in that situation of using pornography and addiction, they can definitely reach out to the program, and we would focus on the issue of prostitution and the reasons, right? So I think there would always have to be a connection to prostitution as well. I think in order for this to be meaningful, right? However, we're not a counseling agency that offers long-term counseling to people in those situations.
Well, we know that the majority of Canadians are engaging or watching pornography at some level, and even recent stats say that most Canadians think that it's morally okay to do. And so you mentioned that pornography is a driving force behind demand. And so I was just wondering if you could kind of tease out for our viewers the link between watching pornography and then the purchase of sex and then sex trafficking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a number of layers to this. And the first one is somebody said that pornography is actually nothing else other than film prostitution, right? So somebody gets paid to have sex, right? And this is being filmed. So I think this is the first element. But the other one is also I think what it drives is it changes people's view on sexuality, what healthy sexuality is. And I think it introduces a lot of things that, people all of a sudden feel like, oh, I would like to try something I saw on pornography, but I don't want to ask my wife or my partner for this. So I'm going to go and pay a woman in prostitution, to do this with me, right? So I think this is the driving factor as well. And then just the sheer availability of pornography is also, I think, something that that impacts younger people, and I think sometimes just seeing something on a screen is not enough, so people want to live it out, which again fuels prostitution on that level as well. So
we spent a lot of time today discussing kind of the problem and then how the program might assist someone who is struggling with the purchase of sex. And so I'm just wondering, do you have a story of transformation or hope of someone who came into the program, they're really struggling with purchasing sex, they had been arrested for it? And yeah, if you could just share that story with us, that outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, we have a gentleman in our program who's come, who participated in the program, and then he came back for a number of years to actually share his story. And really, what it did for him is it was opening up an avenue for his own healing, for his own underlying issues that he felt he had, and sex was always just a sort of an easy fix, but it never actually solved his issues. So he went through counseling. He came and spoke and shared his story, his own struggle. He lost his job in the process of this, and is doing quite well now. And so there's a number of stories that I could tell you, but I think it's really encouraging to see where men grow and change their trajectory and the trajectory of their family and their community and their neighborhood as well.
Really quickly, what would you say to someone who is considering to purchase sex or who is struggling with the purchase of sex?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, address the issue. If you feel an inkling in yourself, that this is an issue that you can't handle by yourself anymore, reach out to somebody, do some research online. When it comes to pornography, there's a number of resources out there. Fight the New Drug, Sex Addicts Anonymous, those kinds of things. Don't let it fester in the dark. Reach out for help, basically.
Well, thank you so much, Hennes, for sharing your expertise on this topic, but also for all the hard work that you've done over the years to come alongside men and just journeying with them and having conversations with them to engage in meaningful change in their life. I really appreciate and value your contributions today. And so folks, if you are tuning in today and you are someone that's struggling with sex addiction or struggling with pornography, we want to highlight a resource that could be available to you, Sex Addiction Anonymous. You can call at 1-800-477-8191. That's 1-800-877-8191. There's also an app called Fortified that you can download that will help you with compulsive porn use. Or as Hennes mentioned, you can visit fightthenewdrug.org for a plethora of resources. Thank you so much for tuning in to Freedom Fighters Code Gray. We hope to catch you next time.